Hey, it's Dawn and Janine here, and we are talking to you today about the idea of the feeling that you've arrived. Like, have you ever had that feeling, Janine, that you feel like I've made it, I'm there, I've reached the goal, I'm at the top?
I think it's one of those elusive things that we're always like, oh, this is the goal. But the thing is, the goal is always changing. So I know for me personally, I've only felt like I've arrived when I've looked actually into the past and be like, oh, I've already done that. But I'm actually already past it and looking into the future. I'm like, okay, what's the next goal? And so even when I do get to the place where I've been striving for and that I've arrived, I'm always up leveling to the next level. And so it's that point of never being stagnant. So I feel like having arrived doesn't feel like a goal for me because there is no end point to the self development. How
Yeah.
do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think it's the same thing. I think in the beginning of my journey as an entrepreneur, it was more like someday I'm going to feel like I've arrived. Like if I could just get there, right, then I'll have that feeling or I'll feel like I accomplished it. I did it. But you're right. Like really when I did get there, it was as it gets closer, right? You're already looking in the distance. And so you kind of hit it. We're going to talk maybe about celebrating it, but we could you want to hit it, but you're already moving on. So it is the reverse where you look back and you're like, "Wow, look where I've come from. Look where I am now." Right? And that's the exciting part is that you can see all that growth. But I think when you're actually getting close, it's no longer the big deal that maybe it was when you set that initial intention, right? Even on the next goal, it's not as big a deal as you become closer and closer because you've grown so much.
And one thing I really like to do, and I make a habit of it, is I like to look back. Who was I a year ago? Who was I 5 years ago? And to see the growth that way, because I often find like you said, when you get close to that goal no longer feels like a big deal because you've changed and you've evolved into a different person. Like what you were thinking at the point when you were making the goal, you've done the work, you've done the inner work, you've done the outer work, so that when you're getting close to that goal, it's no longer feels elusive. It's just who you are now.
Yeah, and that's the beauty, I think, of when something seems so huge, right? It's out of your comfort zone. It's that new area that you're trying to grow into, whether it's your first goal or your 50th. You always have that. You always have that, like that new thing is always like, wow, if I can just achieve that, then I'll feel like this, right? But it
Mm.
never is like that, like you said, because you've done all the work by the time you get there. And that then seems easy and you could do that over and over. So it's that next one that you're starting to think that way about again. So yeah, it doesn't it never stays stagnant. If you're moving and growing, it never stays stagnant. It is really interesting. It's elusive.
And I love that we're talking about this today and just like bringing a clear light to it because like we said, we're always in the future or we're always thinking about the past. But I think it's a good reminder, even if you're very mindful about being in the present, it's just kind of a good reminder of just being mindful of where you are now and appreciating just the step that you are in now. Because at one point, you really wanted to be here and you've arrived, you've made it. If we're going to say it that way, you aren't here now. At one point, you didn't think this was possible for you. So if this is possible for you, what else is?
Yeah. And one thing that I like to do is I actually like to take usually a quarterly kind of assessment of what's happened in the last 3 months. And one of the things that I put down when I break down my categories is growth. Like, so what has happened for me personally in my emotions, in my abilities, in my skill set, in my comfort zone, like where have I become more comfortable? Where have I stretched? And that's a really nice way too, is then to be able to say rather than I made it to here, is I've made it through all of these, right? You can really almost break down into many categories all the ways that you have made it, you've reached it.
I love that so much. I would love to invite everybody who's watched to actually post in the Her Extraordinary Life Facebook group underneath this video. What is something you're doing today that was once your goal, once your point of I've arrived? And
That'll be so fun.
I want you guys to celebrate it. Look at how far you've come. It'll be so good to see. Thank you for joining us today, and we can't wait to see your comments.